Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to this new event of the DECODE project. I would like to thank all partners of the project and all those who have connected with us to spend some time to learn about the development of our work. We hope to be able to correspond with an enjoyable time on topics of your interest. Before we begin, I would like to draw your attention to some of the practicalities of the webinar. We ask all participants to keep their microphone muted when not speaking. We would like also to announce that any questions you may have can be asked in writing in the Q&A section. If you want to add to a question that has already been asked, you can support it by a like in the related question. Likewise, if you want to qualify a question that someone else has written, you can comment on it. This will help us to select questions if we are pressed of time. There are a lot of people online and we want to stick to the timetable. Finally, in this preview, I want to let you know that at some point in the presentation, we will be interacting with the audience. So we ask you to have your mobile phones nearby or browser tab open, so you can answer the questions that some panelists will ask you during the webinar. So let's start with the introduction. Let me first make a brief summary of the project and achievements to date. To put you on the picture, the DECODE project has as its basic objective the institutionalization of sustainable development in higher education institutions. To this end, it aims to empower deans of universities, faculties, and schools to design and implement sustainability impact plans in their academic fields. The project started in December 2020 with the kickoff meeting. During 2021, a needs and wishes analysis was carried out through desk research, surveys of more than 500 deans and 300 academics, and interviews with 30 deans to summarize all these insights in an excellent final report produced by the University of Twente and supported by the University of Naples and the Technical University of Riga. The data from this analysis provided very relevant information to define how the DECODE Council of Deans should be set up. This Council of Deans was launched at the end of 2021. Also, based on this data, other parts of the project will be developed, but this will come later. In today's webinar, we will focus on the presentation of these results of the needs analysis that makes up what the project calls Intellectual Output 1. But for a better understanding, we call it results. So you will see that you will hear our panelists, instead to talk about intellectual outputs, they will talk about results, because we feel that it fits better what we did in this first part of the project. And if you attend this webinar, you will understand how we can integrate sustainability into the academic world. We will do it through this presentation of results and the discussion we will open after the presentation with the whole audience. This interactive activity with the audience will be led by the Center of Higher Education Policy Studies of the University of Twente, CHEPS, the Technical University of Riga, RTU, and the University of Naples, Federico II, UNINA. We will end with some closing remarks and information of next step of the project by the Accreditation Council for Entrepreneurial and Engaged Universities, another one of our partners in the project. But before that, we will start today's event with our guest speaker, Professor Daniella Tilbury, whom I am pleased to introduce to the audience. Of Daniella Tilbury, I could tell you that she has recently been awarded as an honorary fellowship by the University of Cambridge, that she holds a doctorate honoris causa from the University of Girona, or that she is the UK government representative to the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe on issues related to education for sustainable development, and also that she advises to the European Commission on policy issues related to ESD. I could tell you a lot about her background with the university, with UNESCO, or her contributions to higher education for sustainability. But if you are interested for the details, I invite you to surf on the internet or to check the Wikipedia. For that, you will find all exact information on this point. If I may, I will introduce her as an educator, a policy expert, as an academic leader in sustainable development, a professor who has driven the development of the initial framework for higher education in the field of sustainable development, someone who knows this reality very well and plays with her feet on the ground. So who better to speak to us as today as guest speaker? So let me give the floor to Professor Daniella Tilbury to deliver her keynote speech entitled Deans as Changemakers, the Leader, the Learner, and the Lettuce. The floor is yours, Daniella.
Thank you, Jaume. Thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and thank you for that very kind introduction. I just want to signal that I myself have been dean for 8 years before I became vice chancellor in a university or president of a university for some years. So all of this is very familiar territory to me. I'd like to start by thanking GUNi very much, Marta and colleagues from GUNi, who have the pleasure of working with for many years, for this invitation, together with the DECODE partners. It's an opportunity, I think, to be able to challenge some thinking and practice in relation to sustainable development in higher education, but also to share with you some of the experience at the practical level in this agenda that will hopefully feed into the dialogues about the project today. Now, the focus of my presentation is on the role of deans as change makers. And I'm just wanting to see the screen, if we can have the PowerPoints uploaded. I will commence formally with the presentation. Just waiting to see if they appear. There we go. And I'm just going to request control. There we are, perfect. So as I was saying, the focus of the presentation today is on the role of deans as change makers. And I will be speaking about the leader, the learner, and the letters. Now I can hear a few of you being puzzled and thinking, the letters? What does this have to do with higher education? Well, it'll become clear, hopefully, during the course of the presentation. So let me just start with the slides. If I may, there we go. In 2015, the world leaders adopted the 2030 Agenda and its Sustainable Development Goals. Now, I suspect that a lot of you that are online today are here because you already have an interest in this agenda. So I'm very quickly going to just signal the fact that there are 17 ambitious goals that seek to end poverty and inequality and protect the planet, because I'm sure that all of you are quite familiar with this agenda. Something that perhaps we don't all know is that higher education has been very quick to commit to seek to advance the Sustainable Development Goals through the campus, the curriculum, the community, as well as through research. It's been one of the first sectors to say, we're here to support the agenda. And this is perhaps no surprise at all when we know that the universities and colleges have been involved with this agenda since the term sustainable development was first coined, was first put together. The sector was perhaps the key player in the 1980s when the whole concept of framing of sustainability came together. So given this very lengthy relationship with sustainable development, there's a key question, I think, that's relevant to this project that we must ask, and that is, what have we learned? What have we learned after so many decades of this relationship between higher education and sustainable development? Well, I think there's enough statements and declarations from the sector that state consistently that higher education is critical to the transition to sustainable development. There's wide recognition of this, and I'm not going to dwell on it. I'm sure you're familiar with the numerous decades of statements and declarations. I think that equally, we categorically can say that the sector and its commitment is increasing in this agenda. It's strong and it's increasing. And we're talking here about commitment rather than practice. Right? So I think wherever you turn to, whether they be journals, whether they be newspaper articles, whether they be research reports, you can see that there is a strong commitment. And along these lines, I would like to say that in 2022, the Times Higher Impact Rankings also demonstrate that this agenda is being taken very, very seriously by universities. But having said that, the evidence is quite strong in indicating that the progress to date remains very much in the margins of universities and colleges of higher education. It suggests that higher education is adapting rather than transforming. What does that mean? Well, I want to elaborate a little bit more in this presentation, but that's critical, I think, to taking this agenda forward, the recognition that we are adapting, we're integrating, we're adapting, we're not really changing in response to what is required by this agenda. There are various reports that indicate that, and I'm signaling those in that particular PowerPoint. So, I'm sorry, I've just got stuck. There we go. I need to go up again. It seems that the PowerPoints are changing very rapidly. My apologies.
You could try sideways. I think sideways would work.
Yeah. No, it's not, I'm afraid. It seems to have got stuck and skipped 3 slides. Okay, let me just pass control to somebody else to see if that makes a difference. My apologies for this. No, I'm going to try and request control one more time. No, I seem to have lost control of the slides. It's a little frustrating. There we go. So we're back to slide number 2. Your patience, I beg you, for this. Now, okay, so we were, just to recap, I was saying about the importance of adaptation versus transformation. The results or the indicators that this is the case are very obvious. We are finding that leaders are sending conflicting messages to their colleagues, to their students, to their communities because of this adaptation, which means that there are parts of the universities that are adapting and changing for sustainability and part of colleges and universities that are not. And so there's conflicting messages being sent about the importance of this agenda. We also get a sense that staff are overwhelmed, sometimes because they themselves have to bring about the changes in their own programs, in their own departments, because of a lack of consistent leadership. And we certainly have seen the evidence that students feel disempowered and are taking to the streets to complain about climate change, to complain about what universities are doing in respect to this agenda. And finally, there is evidence, particularly across the newspapers and the general feel in the community, that higher education is not doing enough in this agenda. And that was certainly the message at COP when I was there in Glasgow. My perspective is that deans can turn this around. And they can do this by leading, learning, and by giving attention to this lettuce. Let me start by talking about the learning. To be able to be able to bring about changes in the institution to align with sustainable development, deans need to really be able to understand the challenge itself. So to lead effectively, they need to understand what the key issue is. And it's not the thematic themes of sustainable development. That's not the issue. The issue is that we are looking for not an increased awareness in the community, not an increased engagement necessarily from staff and students, but that we need to change the world. That is the core message of Sustainable Development Goals. it would be an absolute mistake to treat the Sustainable Development Goals as a thematic content or as topics. They are more doorways to bring about change in institutions rather than content to be added into what we're already doing. And I think that the deans, very importantly, must commence conversations internally in their institutions about the SDGs and about how they are questioning the way we govern, the way we organize ourselves, the way we live and work, and the impact that all of this has on people and planet. So the current programs, the current content of our programs needs to be questioned, not just an extra topic added on at the end of the week. Similarly, when we talk about learning outcomes, we need to look at learning responsibility and action as competencies for our higher education students. So we develop mindsets and skills that help to anticipate and create alternative futures. This is quite critical, because what we don't want is students what we don't want is students just learning to analyze and understand the landscape as it is changing. What we would like to see is students that are able to shape this rapidly changing landscape. And we know it's rapidly changing. We have COVID, we have economic issues, we have climate change, and the waves will continue as we move more into this century. So the key question is, how can deans help us transform what higher education is about and for, so that we can address these quite deeply in our institutions, not superficially? Some of these conversations have already started to take place at COP26. I made this reference prior to that. I provide here a web link, which I suggest those who are really interested in some of the detail of how COP26 is shaping the narrative in this agenda, has been captured on video by the COP presidency event of November 5th. There were 24 ministers from education, from environment, that were committing to this much deeper transformative change, not just in universities and colleges, but across the education system. A very important commitment that will also be addressed in Egypt at COP27 as we monitor the developments in universities and colleges as well as across the education system. Let me talk a little bit about the learning. Deans need to support, have a critical role to play in learning in two ways. Firstly, learning to understand that the changes are required in the curriculum to be able to teach about the future. So as I said before, a lot of the curriculum at present seems to increase awareness, develop understanding of what the current situation is and how we can problem solve our way out of the current situation. But this agenda requires us to think ahead, to look into the future and to teach about and for the future. And these are results from a particular organization, a student organization that push for teaching the future. And their results show they're European-wide at present, even though they also have influence internationally, about the importance of changes that are called for by students. They were also very active at COP26 and influenced a lot of the agenda. There are also the competencies that were developed by the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, where we're talking about students learning to know and understand, of course, which we do so well in universities already, but deans can help to push the agenda so that they can be learning to live together, learning to do, and learning to be sustainable. These are other dimensions that are not always very present in programs. Deans who are in middle management can work up in terms of informing policy at education level and institutional level, and work across with their colleagues in the programs to transform program offerings, as well as work with students to ensure that these are real and realistic capabilities. But one of the key things that I think is really important with this agenda is the fact that there is learning to be had about how to bring about these changes. It is not easy to bring about deep and meaningful changes across the institution. And it would be a mistake to think that deans are born with this ability to bring about these deep changes. So a key aspect of all of this is the recognition that deans need to learn to be change managers. They need the experiences and they need strategies and tactics to be able to push change, because change in institutions is very much like a snakes and ladders game. You may take 2 steps forward and then be taken 2 steps back. You may go up and down. It's not a linear process. And deans need to have the resilience, the tactics to be able to progress this agenda with colleagues institutionally. It is not just about knowing and understanding, it's about having the capability in this agenda. And so we come to the letters. For me, the letters is a symbol. It's a symbol representing all the contradictions that exist in higher education in the context of sustainable development. Let me just read this out. You cannot put the lettuce in the window of a butcher shop and declare that you're now turning vegetarian. This is exactly what is happening in universities and colleges. We have one new building over there in the corner that's really sustainable, or we have a group of wonderful researchers over there that are developing a new technology that will change the world towards sustainability, or we have a group of students that are actively engaged on campus activities doing something very specific. That is all great, but it remains marginal because the rest of the institution continues business as usual. And if we continue business as usual, it doesn't matter how great these little activities are, they will cancel out. So one of the key things that are important for us to do is to identify these contradictions, and for deans who are uniquely positioned, help change this. This is one particular contradiction that drives my work. I expect you all to be independent, innovative, critical thinkers who will do exactly as I say. Here's the contradiction. We talk about developing students' learning abilities and competencies in being able to change the world. Not just learn and understand, but change the world. And yet we are providing learning environments and pedagogical approaches that do not support that competency. They're contradicting the ability for these competencies to be developed. So this letters is really important, not just in terms of challenging pedagogical practice, the power of the teacher and the learner, the lecturer and the student, but also learning spaces. We need to redesign our learning spaces so we're not all facing the front. We need to design learning spaces that are designed to empower students and create authentic learning experiences on campuses. It's not just marginal, as I say, it's not just this little allotment or food garden. It has to be all inclusive in terms of our campuses. Here's another contradiction. Hey, I love being here with all the plants and animals. It's so fantastic. I think I'll stay around for a really long time. In universities, we have a habit of picking that container, taking it to the lab, and working out how long it's going to take to degrade. Or even trying to find an alternative type of packaging that will degrade quicker. Or some of the social sciences look at where the nearest litter bin might be, who dropped it, and what the motivations for dropping this box in this particular spot might be. Now, for me, these are ridiculous questions, because what we really should be asking is, what type of lifestyle are we leading that require us to have these particular containers in the first place? What type of industry do we have, and what regulation of industry do we have that permit them to have these externalities costs on our society? So we're shifting the type of questions that we ask through sustainable development away from just understanding individual behavior to the bigger context of change that is required. Deans are in exactly the right place to make those changes. And I think a key question the deans need to ask themselves is, am I helping the university to be a mirror in our society, or am I helping the university to be a lighthouse in our society? A mirror reflecting all the bad things that are happening that are unsustainable in our community, and perhaps even using a microscope to analyze it even further? Or are we as deans and we as academic staff looking at providing alternatives, lighthouses that light up the pathways for sustainable communities? And we have to take this long look down our corridors of our institutions to ask ourselves questions, not just in the talk curriculum, not just in our partnerships, but also in the physicality of our environments that are sterile, uninnovative, and certainly not empowering for this change to happen. I'm coming to the end slide now, in keeping with my 15 minutes. And I want to summarize by saying there's three key things, or three key takeaways, I guess, from this message that I have conveyed today that I consider very important. Please, can we consider ways in which deans can lead the challenge against business as usual? We cannot just adapt, we cannot just add, we need to challenge business as usual if we are serious about this agenda. Can we please learn to transform higher education? Deans are not born with the ability to bring about institutional change. It must be learned. It must be supported. Can we create opportunities for deans to learn to engage very tangibly with change, to build the resilience for change, to learn tactics and strategies to embed this more systemic change for sustainability across the institution? And finally, could we please have situations, could we please encourage, could we please develop research that supports deans when they're confronting the contradictions that are very apparent physically, as well as integrated into the everyday culture of higher institutions? Thank you for listening, and I'm very happy to address any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Professor Tilbury, for this brilliant and motivating speech. I think the audience, like as I do, this example of the lettuce. That's not the same saying that doing the things, as it's not the same adapting than transforming. That it's what we suppose we have to do if we want to go to apply the sustainability in our universities. Thank you, even with this problems, with the technological problems that we have had. Thank you very much for your presentation. I think that we still have time, at least for one question. I'm going to pick one of the questions we have from the audience, because I would like to hear, probably the people, the audience want to hear also your opinions. And I want to translate this question that says that there's Beatrice Bellini, which is asking for how we can communicate clearly that the sustainability expectation have different levels from one country to another. So you say the social expectations, for example, are not the same in France, Spain, or the United States, and the sustainability is also a very local concept that has to be integrated into cultural aspects.
Yes, the actions in themselves have to be very locally contextualized, for sure. And this is why sustainable development is not a checklist of things that need to be achieved. Sustainable development is something that has to be constructed with your own academic communities, with your students, with the more broader community at large. There isn't a checklist of things. It has to be co-created. But what is clear with sustainable development is that it is a transformative agenda, that it is not something that is stayed by a linear way, that it requires us to shake the ground quite dramatically in our societies if we are going to be meeting these targets by 2030. You know, that is quite clear. That transformative agenda has been clear from the Secretary General, who pushed for the Sustainable Development Goals all the way through the various agencies that promote it. So, you know, it might be the big picture of how you implement it in practice and where you place your priorities would vary depending on where you live and work. But in terms of the urgency and the depth of change and transformative change that's required, that tends to be quite universal.
Thank you. And maybe one quick answer to another question, because we are a little bit out of time, but we have this issue with technology, and I want to answer another question. There's another saying that asking that what would you say is the greatest challenge deans face when seeking to address sustainability in their institutions?
I would say perceptions. I think the fact that different people in the institution have different levels of understanding of sustainable development, and some tutors may think it's very much just about switching off lights and not really understand the bigger picture, whilst others may be very much concerned with addressing the waste issues on campus and having a clear litter, involving students in a clear picking up litter once a year and doing something very tangible and practical once a year, thinking they can tick the box and say, that's enough for me, I've done my bit. We're now really understanding that it is about rethinking everything that the institution does, and that will take time and collaborative efforts across the piece. And this is why I'm a strong believer that our deans require professional development support, require action research financial support, so that they themselves can investigate the tactics and ways forward to bring the community together, to bring about the change. And there's not enough of those opportunities at present.
Thank you very much for your speech today, for your keynote speech, and also for the answers to these questions. We are moving now to the second part of the seminar, but we will keep all your explanations, because you really illuminate us. You were this light that illuminates us in this path to the sustainable development. Thank you very much, Professor Tilbury. And let me now give the floor to our colleagues that will present the results of the Work Package 1. This part is going to be led by people from CHEF, from John Bloit, from Annette Veindeman, also people from the UNINA, Marina Albanese, Maria Rosalba Gliciani, and our colleague from the Technical University of Riga, Gundas Kokins. So now the floor is yours, and show us the results of this work that you have done during the last month. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jamal. I hope everybody can hear me. And yes, is it? And everybody can see the first slide of the presentation that I'm about to start. Is that also the case, Jamal? Can we see the presentation first slide? Okay. Well, welcome to this presentation on the results from the first year of our DECODE project. By the way, thanks, Daniella, for your really inspiring presentation that fits very well with the things that we are going to say about deans as change makers. Because it's about embedding sustainability in academic departments, and it's not just about indeed switching off the lights. And in the first year of our DECODE project, we've talked about, we looked at the challenges that deans are facing when it comes to embedding sustainability in their academic departments. And I'm presenting this work on behalf of the whole DECODE team, of course, but I will start with this presentation, and then my colleague Rosalba Gliciani from Naples will continue. And at some point, our colleague Gundas from Riga Technical University will do a little bit of an opinion survey amongst the audience to see what you feel about the barriers and the challenges that deans are facing. Then my colleague Annette will take over, and then I will at the end come up with a few concluding remarks. But first, let's continue with presenting a little bit about the project and how it looks like. I hope I can manage to switch. Yeah, this is the first bit about how the project looks like. So the project is about integrating, embedding sustainability in academic departments. So we started with building a foundation for the work we are going to do, because we want to give some tools, some help to deans that are facing this challenge of embedding sustainability in their departments. And we want to give them information, inspiration, some examples of how to do it. It's not that we know everything, of course, but we at least would like to get them, give them some inspiration and some tools to build up their expertise and to learn from others. So in the first year of the project, we started by doing a little bit of literature research. That's of course everybody's doing. And then we set up a couple of questions for interviews to be held with deans from different departments all across Europe. And my colleague Rosalba will tell you a bit about those interviews. And the information that we derived from the literature review was also used to set up a survey among deans as well as academics to see what the state of the art is when it comes to embedding sustainability in education, in research, in outreach activities of departments. And so we wanted to see what are the activities that are going on right now in Europe, what are strategies that deans are making use of, how do they encourage integrating sustainability in the curriculum, and of course also in the research, what obstacles do they face and what practices would they like to share. So we did a survey over among more than 500 deans from different places in Europe. We also surveyed academics that are working in the departments. More than 300 were giving us their insights, and all of that helped us to build a nice state of the art. And you can read all about this in the DECODE project website, and the web link is at the bottom of this slide. And so we have an integrated report. As Diana was already saying, there's lots of attention for sustainable development and sustainable development goals in academia. But the question now is, how can we go to the next step and really integrate this in curricula, in research, in our way of working and our way of thinking? Attention awareness is not enough. We have to go to the next level. And our students are really demanding more attention and more activity on this agenda. And 9 out of 10 students really say that sustainable development is something that universities should actively incorporate and promote. And at the end of last year, 2021, the European University Association also carried out a survey to see what the state of the art is when it comes to the funding of this sustainability agenda. And they came up with quite a few challenges. So we see deans as important change makers, and they are the ones that have to give example, show the way, encourage their staff as well as the students. But they're facing lots of challenges, and so they need help. They need tools to make the change and to get to the next level, so to speak. And to remind you, of course, what sustainability is, I think most of you will be aware of that. Sustainability is the intersection of the 3 P's of people, planet, profit or prosperity, and also includes peace and partnerships. So there's lots of things that are at the intersection of all of these dimensions, and addressing them requires thinking out of the box. It really requires people to take the perspective from more disciplines at the same time. And because the challenges are complex, the challenges are really, let's say, wicked. And our work has also found out that deans are indeed struggling in how to make that happen. And they are doing this in various ways. One is very active, the other is less active. Some universities are really supporting this throughout the whole universities, and others are just starting out in doing this. So these are some pictures that show a bit of the variety of the ways in which higher education institutions are integrating sustainability, like setting up a green office, like in the University of Maastricht, or trying to implement attention for sustainability throughout the whole of the university's curriculum, which is quite an ambitious thing that is taken on by the Radboud University in our country, the Netherlands. And there's universities that really try to become greener by taking a critical look at their campus and how the operation of the campus is taking place. And there's collectives of universities like the Aurora European University Network that is also paying attention very much to sustainability throughout their whole research and education. So these are things that deans are facing, and deans then, like I said, they need help. They need tools to integrate sustainability in their academic departments. They can really make use of the things that are shown here in this picture. It starts with showing the way through a strategy, building a vision. Then it's all about monitoring and evaluation. In the second part of this circle, it's about, of course, learning to get better. The third tool that they can make use of is the use of incentives. That is, of course, the third tool is building up capacity and skills and expertise about how to change the curriculum and the pedagogies that are employed by teachers to integrate sustainability and to really make the competencies that Diana talked about just a while ago, to make them part of the learning outcomes. So that's the third set of tools. The fourth set of tools is encouraging and rewarding staff as well as students, recognizing activities or achievements either financially or more symbolically that can really help push students and academics to make a change. And the fifth set of tools is around authority and regulations. And so this can be very strict, like enforcing attention for sustainability throughout the whole of the curriculum, but it could also be less strict and more voluntary by building elective courses for students, allowing them to take on parts of the programs that pay attention to sustainability. So it's a whole set of tools that deans can make use of, and we were wondering what types of tools deans are already making use of throughout Europe, and what obstacles and what barriers they are facing. So we wanted to ask the deans, and we've done this through interviews. And the interviews, that's something that my colleague Rosalba will talk to you about, and I'll come back to you in a few minutes. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Ben. Good evening, everyone. As Ben already said, we as Federico II University, together with Marina Albanese, who is the project leader of the DECODE project, we supported CHEPS in performing and achieving the first project results by performing and analyzing 30 semi-structures interviews addressed to a sample of deans, head of departments, or their representative in order to detect their perspectives on embedding sustainability in their academic units, being them departments, schools, or faculty. So as also Professor Tilbury mentioned before, we focus on middle range management, not top management, but middle range management in the academic field. Next slide, please. Okay. As mentioned, the aim of this part of the analysis was to identify opportunities and obstacles faced by leaders of academic units as we defined deans or their representatives in their effort to embed sustainability in their units, education, research, and societal engagement activities. In reference to the sample, 30 leaders of academic units were selected randomly from 22 European countries, 50% of them being Northern European countries, 27% of them coming from Southern Europe universities, and 23% of them coming from Eastern Europe universities. Only some of the respondents have a specific responsibility for sustainability within their academic units. That means that not all the deans were officially attributed a role in sustainable development. Next slide, please. Okay. As Ben mentioned before, we forged the interview according to the 5 dimensions of tools regarding strategy and awareness building, monitoring and organizational learning, capacity building, incentives, and authorities. For each of these dimensions, we addressed a set of questions, and deans responded according to their knowledge or their own experience. For the purpose of this presentation, we just selected some of the quotations that most express their feedback on this topic, such as the following. As you can see, we prefer to maintain their responses anonymous, and we, for the purpose of the analysis, we attributed a code to each respondent. When it comes to strategy, most respondents described strategies and policies performed in terms of emergent strategies, not codified, but mostly planned, or they simply described what the future lines will be within their units in the following years. Very few respondents described a deliberate and codified strategy in terms of sustainability, sustainable development within their unit. Next slide, thank you. In terms of capacity building, what emerged most from the interviews was the fact that an interdisciplinary approach to both teaching and research could be very successful in implementing effective sustainable development or sustainability related initiatives. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. Incentives have been a very challenging aspect to be dealt with, since what emerged most by all the interviews, almost all the interviews, were 2 main aspects. The paucity of financial resources that deans or their representative have in order to implement sustainable development related initiatives, and also the lack of time that most deans or academics can dedicate to these activities, because most of them are extracurricular activities involving students, staff, or other academics, but beyond their duties. So the issue of the incentives was a very hot topic during the interviews. Next slide, please. Okay, last but not least, the topic of authority and voluntary actions. Also in terms of authority, many challenges emerged in terms of rigid regulations that many academic units and many universities have within their policies, but also the local government regulations that sometimes can be very strict when implementing sustainability or sustainable development initiatives. On the other side, we detected many voluntary actions and many initiatives carried out by deans or academics in terms of sustainability and sustainable development, also involving students, civil societies, and other colleagues. Together with green offices, there are more structured and codified initiatives. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And now I will take over the presentation as part of the interactive activity. And before I do that, I would just want to thank all of our hosts and panelists for a really inspiring, engaging, and interesting start to the webinar. And I'm seeing that also we have more than 70 participants today. So that also gives us a great opportunity, not only share information, inspiration, and best practices, but also for us to listen to you and to really gather useful insights and your opinions that can also help us further in as the project progresses through the other phases of it. So we will do a short interactive activity that we're going to do in Mentimeter. And before I share the joining information and how you can as well access this Mentimeter, I just want to shortly explain what is going to happen once I show you how to join. So you will use the information in the next slide to join the Mentimeter that is prepared. Once you do that, you will see what's seen here on the left side. You can use your mobile phone, or you can open another tab in your browser. I would say the mobile works the best because that gives you the opportunity to still continue seeing everything that we have on the screen without a second monitor, while being able to easily as well engage with us. Once you have joined, you will see the screen where there's a little heart, which I will ask you, it's not mandatory, but please click on it, because that allows me to see how many of you have already joined to gauge when we're ready to start. Then you don't have to do anything, just wait for everyone to join, and I will switch over and you will start seeing some questions where you can engage and provide some answers back to us. And once you have voted or provided your opinion, you just have to wait for us to change the slide again, and that will also happen automatically. In case you get maybe disconnected, that is no problem. You will see the sharing information always on the top of your screen in all the slides, so you should have no problem going back just in case something goes wrong. So I'm sharing now the information how you can join. If you're using the mobile phone or the browser, you can go to menti.com and enter the code that you see here on the screen. Also, you can scan the QR code to also get the link automatically and join the game directly without having to enter any code. And I see that already we have more than 5 hearts, so glad to see everyone joining. While we're waiting, today I realized with researching some trends is that sustainability and sustainable development as search terms in Google are very seasonal. They drop in interest right around the Christmas time. But interestingly enough, as our interest about this in our organizations drops, interest in active and practical activities such as recycling, secondhand plastic, and sustainable diets rises right through the roof, exactly through that period when sustainability sort of is not in trend. So I do like to think that this is a positive as well sign that as we're going into a rest during the holiday season, we're ourselves thinking more and more how we contribute practically in our everyday lives towards as well sustainability. And by the way, the peak of the season with interest in sustainable development in Google searches rises straight in the first couple of weeks in January. So straight after it drops during the holiday season. So it does even out a little bit from time to time. So I also think that that is a good sign. We will now start with a very short warm-up question, just to make sure that everyone is able to join and everyone is able to answer these questions. So what do you think? What percentage does lighting take up of the global electricity use? I will set down about 30 seconds, so we have as well the time to think about, is it 2%, 5%, 15%, 30%, or 45%? By the way, LED lighting still is considered one of the best ways we ourselves, by replacing the light bulbs, can reduce electricity consumption by more than 90%. I myself am using light bulbs that I can control through my smartphone. And the great thing about this is that you can set that when you leave the house, when your phone leaves your Wi-Fi, it automatically turns off the lights, just in case you have forgotten what the problem is. Now let's see what the top answers is. And actually with most of the answers going in 15%, I can confirm that is correct. It has dropped from 20% pre-COVID, because with most offices and quite a lot of businesses working remotely, it has as well substantially reduced electricity consumption when it comes to lighting. Let's go over to the next question, which is related to the barriers preventing sustainability from being embedded throughout university departments. So please choose 3 of the most important, or the, let's say, most crucial barriers that are really preventing embedding sustainability throughout the university departments. I will give ample time, at least 1 minute, to make sure that all of us can as well read the questions and see also all the answers. Also, if you have not been able to join the Mentimeter until this point, that is also no problem. As you can see on the top of the screen, you can still visit menti.com and then use the code that you see on the top of the screen to still join the presentation and contribute to some of the feedback we can gather from the audience during this presentation. And I can see that the top of the two top ones that we see right now is investments required. So as we saw as well in the previous slides by Maria Rosalba, it's all about the money and also lack of clear sustainability strategy in the university. So thank you for sharing. The second opinion that we want to gather from you is related to what are the best ways to engage students in sustainability transformations. As well, from the interviews, many of you shared as well your view that that's quite crucial to making sure that sustainability can be embedded in the higher education institutions. So what do you think are the three best alternatives how we can engage our students? I will also give another minute to make sure that all of us have the time. So let's see what we have as top picks here. So the discussions about sustainability in the classroom is leading with #1, and the second and third place are quite close to each other, with involving students also in the university-wide steering committees, as well as establishing a green office that is led by our students. And last but not least, what we would like to hear from you is what do you believe are the most useful supportive mechanisms or initiatives that helps push sustainability agenda of your department. So here you can again choose 3 alternatives or 3 of the most useful support mechanisms that can be used. So let's see results, and I see that head-to-head we have going embedding sustainability in the teaching and research of the unit, as well as in the engaging staff training and peer learning as top possibilities as well, how we can create supportive mechanisms. With on the third place, but still a bit divided with financial as well rewards, so incentives that was already mentioned by Ben and Maria Rosalba. So thank you for as well providing the vote here. So with that being said, I do want to thank you for this very short and engaging interactive session that allowed us as well to store and get some insights as well from you, and to use the possibility to have more than 60 participants. And without further ado, I will now give control over the slides and hand over the reins of the presentation to Annette.
All right, thank you for that. Let's start. So we had a chance over the last year to run the DECODE survey, and we were really lucky. We reached more than 500 deans across 30 European countries. 27 of those were EU countries. We also reached 2 academics to confirm the results. This time we'll talk more about the deans, but you can also look up the results from the academics on our resource platform online. All right, let's see. For some reason, it's not working right now. All right, yeah, here we are. So one of the first things I wanted to talk about is strategies and policies, because this is about establishing a common vision. If we want to have a transformational change, we want to have a vision and approach where we're going. And when we talk to deans and we talk to people, what we often see is that there is approach where there's a central level strategy, but this is not always translated to the academic level strategies. So you have this lip service at a higher level, and sometimes that's good because it provides you the flexibility to have the flexibility to develop your own strategy. But other times it means that it remains there, but nothing is being done. And we see it also coming through other results in the survey. Now, what we see here is that at the central level, 67% already have the strategy and 26 are still working on it, which means that in a few years' time, we expect around 90% to have a central level strategy. The numbers are a little bit lower for the unit level strategy, but also there we see quite substantial improvement. So there is a motivation to establish this vision and approach, and it's coming both at the central and unit level strategy. All right. Now, when it comes to change, it's important to understand drivers and obstacles. And we talked about, we looked at 9 drivers. You see 6 of those on the right side. And what is interesting is that the first and foremost driver is a shared value. So there's a very strong intrinsic value, with over 80% saying that it is a shared value amongst the staff. And these are people who are already undertaking sustainability initiatives at their academic unit. The next one is a strategic priority. And the third one is a request by central leadership. So you actually see when you look at these 3 priorities that it's a lot about getting all hands on the deck and getting everyone involved and having that common vision. Now, when we look at the bottom 3, you see somewhat more extrinsic motivations, such as funding. We had a lot of discussion in chat about funding. We see visibility in international rankings, and we see good career opportunities. Now, these 3 are still important, but as drivers, they're less important than the first 6 drivers. That said, keep them in mind as we move to the obstacles, because you'll see them again in the obstacles. All right. Good. Yeah, thanks. Now it should be 1 slide back. Yeah, perfect. So funding comes up in the obstacles, and you see that it's second and the third most important obstacle. So even though it's not a driver, when it comes to obstacles, it's a pretty big obstacles. So the discussion you had in chat, it's an interesting one, because even if it doesn't drive it, it can stop initiatives from taking place. The second one is time, and time could be partially due to the high workload, also to the mission overload, teaching, research, societal engagement, and operations. But it could be also about taking a maybe approach where you try to add it on top of other things instead of trying to integrate it, and trying to integrate it and prioritize the time spent on sustainable development. Let's say, instead of prioritizing the number of articles published, could be another way approached could be another way to approach it. When it comes to things that are less important as obstacles, those are actually things that are more substantial in a sense, more structural. So these are career ambitions, accreditation, support from central leadership. If these would be obstacles, they would be quite hard to solve, but these are not seen as major obstacles. Let's move on to the next one. Now, when we see these drivers and obstacles, one of the things we want to know is how do we address it and what support mechanisms do we need to have to address them? Now, more than 50% of deans indicated 5 support mechanisms that they would like to see. The first one was the support with strategy development for their academic unit. The second one was external funding to realize these initiatives. The third one focused on staff training and opportunities, followed by peer learning and good practice exchange. Also, support from the central institutions, leadership was an important aspect. The remaining things were less important, such as data collection and monitoring or regulatory change. All right, and what is nice about DECODE project is that 3 of those support mechanisms we're actually planning to offer. All right, now, when it comes to change, it's not only about plans and visions, but it's also about what we do on ground. So we wanted to see what people are doing. When it comes to education, we see that 70% of respondents are already embedding sustainability in their education, and 55% offer extracurricular activities. Now, when it comes to transformational approach and embedding education for sustainable development in their teaching, this is less common. So it could be an overlooked opportunity. It's not only about embedding sustainable development in the content, it's also about using transformational teaching approaches and the environment that complements that learning. All right, next slide. In terms of research activities, a lot of the respondents said that they're already pursuing sustainable development topics in their research portfolio. What was less done was focusing on research contents and consultancy work. For some of the people, this might not be interesting, but for the others, this again might be overlooked opportunity to work together with municipalities, with the industry, and solve these problems together. Now, in the presentation, we looked at student engagement and we talked about the role of students. Also in interviews, a lot of people said that they're motivated and driven to make this change to support the development of future leaders. When we asked about what role students play in the transformation of academic units, most deans felt that students are highly motivated to learn about sustainability topics. So that was over 70%. However, when it came to actually involving students or making them aware of the efforts that the units are making, this was far less the case. So we can see that students don't seem to be well aware of the sustainability ambitions of the departments. And it's quite rare to involve students in decision-making of the academic departments, academic units, schools, and faculties. So this might be seen as a missed opportunity. If students are motivated to learn more about sustainability topics, it doesn't have to stay in the classroom. There's a real chance to involve students in the decision-making process and in making them aware of the efforts that the unit is trying to attain. All right, let's move on. Future outlook. Now, when we look at the future outlook, more than 70% of the deans say that the attention to sustainability will increase substantially in the next 5 years. And that holds true for all 4 functions: research, teaching, societal engagement, operations, and administration. There are very few people who think it's not going to be the case. That's a huge and massive change, and they will need all the help they can get from their employees, from their students, from central leadership, and from each other through peer-to-peer learning. That said, I will let Ben finish off the final slide with the conclusions.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Annette. Well, yeah, indeed, this is the final slide. Just one slide to finish it all up. We've seen lots of awareness and initiatives around embedding sustainability in academia, so that's not a problem. What our deans and the other academics that we talked to did identify that there are quite a few challenges when it comes to embedding sustainability in the curriculum or in the research. And what is also has become clear in the poll we just did a few minutes ago is that there is often a lack of financial resources that's often seen as an obstacle in realizing ambitions. There's also quite a bit of difficulty around time because academics may not often feel they have enough time to invest in starting new initiatives. So these are some of the challenges. The success factors when it comes to embedding sustainability are mentioned as being the commitment of central leadership. So the central university strategy is often helpful when it comes to starting initiatives. But involvement of the entire academic unit is also equally important. And so there's a lot of challenges and things to think about. Deans and academics have identified that they need help, they need support to realize their ambitions around this topic of embedding sustainability. They need support for developing the strategy, they need resources, they need time. That's also something that came out of the poll we just did some while ago. So there's quite a few things that are put on the table of the academic departments there. And I think our project is hopefully giving deans and others some inspiration and some information on how to embark on the task of embedding sustainability in academic departments. And we hope to set up a network in such a way that deans can learn from each other and they can then exchange experiences and see what has worked and what has not worked so well. So yeah, becoming a more green university is indeed and not an easy task. There's lots of challenges, there's lots of support that is required, and it's never, as Kermit the Frog told us, it's not easy being green, and we hope that by starting and doing this DECODE project, we can make it a little bit more easy, and hopefully this will help deans really transform their departments into more green departments that can take on the grand societal sustainability challenges. And so I'd like to thank you very much for this presentation, and maybe there's some questions that you would like to ask us. You can do that in the Q&A, of course, and we'll try our best to address them. So thanks very much.
Thanks. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Maria Rosalba. Thank you, Gunda. Thank you, Annette, for this, let me say, clear and dynamic presentation, because the sense is that it has been short, but you explain a lot of things, and you were touching many issues. I realize also that you have answered some questions written in the questions and answers, but it comes a new one that is not replied by you. So let's take advantage of that, and I pass on you this new question. It's from Mohsen Abdulnaga, and is asking what kind of criteria were set in selecting the deans to participate in the study. Any one of you can reply?
Well, I can try. Thank you for the question. We sent out, I think, hundreds of emails to deans all across Europe. We had a database of a couple of thousand deans that we had available, thanks to our colleagues in Münster, the ACEEU unit, and some of them replied and some did not, but that's the survey. So we had a response of 500 to 600 deans replying, and we have a big report on the survey that you're welcome to consult. When it comes to the interviews, Rosalba talked about the interviews. We did 30 interviews, and we asked deans that had some responsibility for embedding sustainability in their department. So we knew from our networks and contacts that there were deans in different places in Europe that were doing things around that. So we approached them. Some were willing to talk to us, some didn't have the time. And so it was not a random sample we did. It was more of a selected sample, but maybe my colleagues would like to add to this. But I advise you to look at our reports on the DECODE.council website.
Thank you. We have another question, but I think it is related with the next part of the presentation, because it's related to the plans for next steps in the project. So I will pass this question for our next speaker. And as I don't see any other question to answer, let me check. There's another way. Okay, there's no other question now to answer related to the explanation of these results of the first part of the project. I will give the floor to Aventia Vilona, which is our partner from the Accreditation Council for Entrepreneurial and Engaged Universities. She's going to inform us about the next steps of the project. And at the same time, she's going to reply the last two questions that we have in the chat. And I will give her the floor also to make the closing remarks, or at least to finalize the webinar. So please, Aventia, the floor is yours, and explain us about the next steps of the project, and give the closing remarks to the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie, for the opportunity to close the webinar today. And hello, everyone. As been introduced, my name is Aventia Vilona, and I work for ACEU. It stands for the Accreditation Council for Entrepreneurial and Engaged University. So perhaps some of you are familiar with my name already, as I've been the officer assigned to reach out to deans and reply to emails and your inquiries. So nice to see you all today. Before we end the webinar today, I would like to take this opportunity to extend my gratitude to Professor Daniella Tilbury for such inspiring talks and enlightening discussion on the critical roles of dean as changemakers in transforming higher education. It has been a great honor to have you as our guest speaker today, and we truly look forward to having another opportunity to collaborate with you again very soon. So thank you once again for your time as well as for your support. Additionally, I would like to thank all DECODE team members as well for the time and efforts given in preparing and hosting today's webinar, especially to Ben, Annette, Rosalba, and Gunars for delivering such an insightful presentation, discussions, as well as leading a very interesting and interactive activity. I think it is safe for me to speak on behalf of the whole DECODE team that the results of the first work package of the project have really given us a solid foundation, not only for the establishment of the DISC Council, but also the other core elements of the project that we're going to work on very soon. So to answer the last question that was asked, to briefly inform you, other than the sustainability analysis in higher education that has been presented today, and the Dean's Council that we launched in November last year, we will continue our work by creating a toolkit. That toolkit will consist of more than 100 instruments and best practices, including generic impact pathways, impact roadmaps to support deans and academic leaders in embedding sustainability in their academic units. And towards the end of the project lifetime as well, we'll organize an empowerment program for deans, academic leaders, and their representative for sustainability to ensure that the project, will support them and give them the right knowledge, skills, and tools to increase their developmental contribution to sustainability. So therefore, stay tuned for our progress and for more insightful results. So we will actively inform and communicate our progress to our social media as well as our project results. And last but not least, I would like to thank all participants for attending today's webinar. We appreciate your being with us today, for your time, for your feedback, ideas, as well as your continuous support. And lastly, for your information, the recording of the webinar as well as the presentation delivered today will be made available on the DECODE website. Therefore, we would like to encourage you to check our website, connect with us on LinkedIn and Twitter to get the notification when the materials have been uploaded. And if you have any additional questions, either about the webinar or about the project, feel free to write to us at info@decode-council.org, or you can use the contact form or our websites. So I think that is all for me. I think we have completed a very successful and interesting webinar. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you, everyone, and have a very lovely evening. And we look forward to seeing you again very soon. Goodbye.